Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In the previous video, we looked at what a full database backup was and its function, and I demonstrated how you can take a full database backup using the GUI and how to take a full database backup using T-SQL. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a transactional log backup and its purpose. So let's go. If you'll notice here that the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the database we created in the previous video by highlighting the drop database command name and executing it. And there we go. And if I refresh it, you'll see that it's dropped. So now I'm going to recreate the backup database from scratch, and we're going to start looking at how to do transactional log backups. There are two primary requisites for when you're taking a transactional log backup. One is that the recovery model of the database you're going to do a transactional log be in full mode. And the way we can check that is if you execute this command. And I've already given you this before where we talked about recovery models. So just highlight and execute. And there you'll get a list of all the databases and their recovery model descriptions. The one we're interested in is backup database, and obviously it's in full, so we can take transactional log backups. If it was in a simple mode or a bulk log mode, then we would have to alter it and change it. And if you need to change a recovery model, then obviously this is the command. Alter database name, set recovery to whichever model you want. In this case, we already have it full. So now I'm going to use that database that we just created. And like previously, I'm going to create a table in that database. I'm going to insert 6 records, just like we did. I'm going to view the records. And there we go. So now obviously, we're just like we did in the previous video. We've got a table with 6 records. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a full database backup. The second requisite to a transactional log backup is that you must have a full database backup of the database you're going to be doing a transactional log against. So we have to have a full database backup, otherwise you'll get an error. So we're now going to take a first database backup and execute that, and it'll only take a second. Again, I'm going to verify that full database backup is valid, and you'll see it's valid, and that's fine. So now here's a command. It's called restore header only from disk, followed by =, followed by where the backup of the database resides. And in this case, this is the path. And you'll see this is where I backed up my database. So if I highlight this, we can actually look inside the .back extension. And this gives you a tremendous amount of information, such as the backup name. Obviously, it's the backup full database name, the backup type. Full database backup type is 1. Transactional log backup type is 2, and differential backup type is type 5. It tells you the position, which is the first, and it will give you the device type, which is disk. And then obviously there has other information such as the server name and database. And if you scroll to the right, you can look at the date it started and completed and other relevant data. But this is the important thing. So now we know that we've taken a full database backup, and we've looked inside it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert another record into the products table. So insert record after a full database backup, but before a transactional log. So the question we have now is, we've taken a full database backup of the products table, which has 6 rows. If it were to crash now, and we can recover it, we can recover those 6 rows by doing a restore on the full database backup. But what happens after we've taken a full database backup and we insert rows, as in this example? So we've taken a full database backup, and now I'm going to do an insert into that row. And now if I view that same data, obviously you'll notice that I have an extra row added, the doll at Toys R Us. At this point, as I said, if the database were to crash and we were to use the backup database, we would only get the first 6, not the 7th. We would lose data. So the question now becomes, after we take full database backups, how do we manage and how do we ensure that the preceding data modifications or data inserts or updates, how are those recorded? And that's where the transactional log backup comes in. So now I'm going to taking a transactional log backup. And remember, this is just a caveat. This can be only taken if the database recovery model is in full, which we've checked. And we've taken a full database backup, which we've just executed. So that's checked. So now we can take a backup transactional log. Now what this will do, it will log that new entry of the 7th insert here. The backup log command is very similar, if not identical, to the backup database, as you can see here. Backup database. The only difference actually is now we're saying backup log, backup database, followed by the same script. So now if I highlight this and execute, it'll execute it very quickly. Now if I look inside that back file, there it is. So this .back file has the full database backup and the transactional log backup. And obviously in order to view it, we're going to look inside it. So now if I highlight this restore header from disk followed by the path name, if I execute that, you'll now see that indeed I have not only the full database backup, but I also have the transactional log backup information. You'll notice the backup type, as I said, is 2 for transactional log, and here is a script here, the result set. So the backup type is transactional log, as you can see, and it's position 2 because that's the next position we took that backup log. Let's just validate that transactional log is valid, and it is. So now what would happen if another insert log were to happen? At this point, I've taken a full database backup, which has the first 6 rows. Then I added a insert for the 7th row, and then I took a transactional log, which logged that 7th row. So what happens if I insert another record, as in this case? At this point, if we look at let's look at the data now. And now you'll notice I have 8 records. So the first 6 have been backed up by the full database backup. The 7th row was backed up by the first transactional log. And if we were to restore the database using the full database backup and the transactional log backup that we have, we would only get 7 records and we would not get the 8th record. So what we have to do is take another transactional log backup. And that's what we're going to do now. So now I'm going to take another transactional log backup. And now if we look inside that entire .back backup, we'll notice that we indeed have 2 transactional log backups right here, as you can see. So what this illustrates is that after a full database backup is created on the database, at that point we have all the data that we need to restore the database. If after the full database backup we have modifications or inserts or updates and deletes, and we want to capture that data, then we must take a transactional log backup to capture that additional data since the last full backup. After taking that transactional log, if there's additional data being added or modified, then in order to capture that data after the first transactional log backup, we must take another transactional log backup, and so on. So as we progress through the day, adding data, modifying the database, it is where transactional log comes in that allows us to restore the data to the point in time of disaster. So that's why it's critical to understand what the transactional log does and what the transactional log backup does. And that is record, basically back up all the mini backups since the last full backup. And when we talk about restoring a database, you'll realize how important it is that we have not only the full database backup, but all the transactional log backups in order that we took to restore that database. But we'll be talking about that in the later when we talk about restores. So now you get an idea on the function of transactional log backups. And remember, the primary purpose also is not only to back up the data, but it's also at the same time truncates the log, the transactional log file, and it manages the size and prevents it from overusing the disk, as we've mentioned in the previous videos. That's why I mentioned the importance of transactional log and devoted several videos to understanding this transactional log and how that works and how transactional log backup works. Now you're getting a clearer understanding of the importance of that process. So the next video I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what's called the differential backup and its purpose. And then finally, I'm going to bring all this together and give you a real life scenario of how to strategize in creating a backup strategy utilizing the backup, full backup, differential backup, and transactional log backup. And that'll become even clearer, I hope, than we have here so far. So I'm going to leave it right now, and this is Raphael with how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.